Welcome to Bookpods. So, if you look at the landscape of new businesses right now, it honestly looks less like a growing orchard and, well, a lot more like a graveyard.
Yeah, that is a really harsh reality to confront. But I mean, the statistics are right there. 50% of businesses fail within their first 5 years.
Which is just a staggering number to think about.
It really is. And the sheer volume of those failures, it points to a systemic flaw. It's not just individual bad luck or a bad product.
Right, there's a pattern.
Exactly. What really stands out in the data is the specific cause of death for the vast majority of them. 8 out of 10 of those failures fold specifically due to a lack of profit.
Wait, so they're not failing to make sales?
No, not necessarily. They might be generating tons of revenue, making plenty of sales, but they're completely failing to keep any of the money they make.
Oh, wow. So the machine is running, but it's just like burning through fuel without actually going anywhere.
That is a perfect way to put it.
Well, that survival crisis is really at the focal point of our discussion today. We're doing a deep dive into the source material from the book Profit First by Michalowicz.
Yeah, and the mission here is really to decode why hardworking entrepreneurs who bring in plenty of revenue end up with absolutely nothing to show for it.
Exactly. We are going to explore how to transform a business from essentially a cash-eating monster into a predictable money-making machine. And the craziest part is that it all relies on a shockingly simple psychological trick.
Right. But we have to diagnose the illness before we prescribe the cure, right?
Right.
We need to look at why people who work so relentlessly end up with zero profit.
And the sources argue it comes down to a math equation, like the fundamental formula every single one of us is taught from the moment we decide to sell a product or a service.
The traditional formula, yeah, sales minus expenses equals profit.
I mean, on paper, it seems totally logically sound, you know?
Mm.
You sell your product, you pay all your vendors and your overhead, and whatever is left over at the bottom of the ledger is your profit.
Logically sound, yes, but human psychology completely undermines it. Relying on that formula triggers two really powerful behavioral phenomena.
Okay, what's the first one?
The first is the primacy effect. As humans, we naturally assign the most importance to the very first thing we encounter, and we tend to neglect what comes last.
Okay, so in that traditional formula, sales is positioned right at the front.
Exactly. So the entrepreneur naturally obsesses over top-line revenue. They pump all their energy into making more sales, assuming that the profit at the very end of the equation is just going to, magically materialize.
It becomes the headline metric.
Right. But because profit comes last, it gets treated as a byproduct. It just becomes the leftovers. And that leads directly into the second, much more dangerous phenomenon.
Parkinson's law.
Yes, Parkinson's law, which dictates that our demand for a resource will naturally expand to consume whatever supply is available.
Like time, right. If you give a team a week to write a quarterly report, the process takes a week, but give them 2 days.
They somehow get it done in 2 days.
Right.
Exactly.
You know, I was reading this and thinking, Parkinson's law is perfectly explained by a tube of toothpaste.
Oh, the toothpaste analogy is great.
Right. Because when you buy a brand new tube, you don't even think about conservation. You just squeeze this massive, perfect swirl onto your brush. A chunk of it falls into the sink, and you don't even care because the tube is full.
You've got plenty of it.
Exactly. But fast forward a few weeks. The tube is almost empty. Suddenly you turn into this, structural engineer. You're flattening it, rolling it, scraping it against the edge of the bathroom counter.
Trying to get every last drop.
Yeah. You somehow miraculously get 10 more brushes out of a tube that looked completely empty because you become highly resourceful when the resource is visibly constrained.
And applying that exact toothpaste logic to a business bank account explains the 80% failure rate we talked about earlier.
Oh, so?
Well, the traditional accounting formula practically forces you to spend whatever cash is sitting in front of you. Revenue comes in and it sits in one big aggregated account.
So the business owner looks at that big number.
They feel flush with cash, and boom, Parkinson's law kicks in. They upgrade their software, they hire more contractors, maybe they buy nicer office chairs. They just intuitively find expenses to eat up the available supply.
And by the time they get to the profit part of the equation, the tube is empty.
Exactly. There's nothing left.
So the fundamental question here is, why wait until the business bank account is empty to trigger that resourcefulness? If human nature forces us to consume whatever cash is sitting right in front of us, simply, trying harder to save is just a losing battle?
Willpower is finite. You can't rely on it. The solution is to artificially hide the cash from ourselves by flipping the math entirely.
Okay, so what is the new formula?
The new formula Michalowicz proposes is sales minus profit equals expenses.
Wow. Okay, so you take your cut before you pay a single bill.
Exactly. You secure the profit first, hence the name of the system.
Profit first. Makes sense.
The author actually compares the implementation of this new formula to effective weight loss tactics.
Like a diet.
Yeah, because a successful diet rarely relies on willpower alone, right? It relies on altering your environment. So the profit first system uses 4 core principles that mirror dietary changes.
Okay, lay them out for me.
First, use a smaller plate. Second, serve sequentially. Third, remove temptation. And fourth, enforce a rhythm.
Okay, using a smaller plate makes intuitive sense for portion control at dinner. I mean, you literally cannot physically fit as many mashed potatoes onto a tiny saucer.
Right. The space is constrained.
But translating that to banking, do I just open a bunch of checking accounts? Is that what that means?
Yes, actually. Instead of pouring all your revenue into one giant serving bowl where payroll, taxes, and profit all just get mixed up together, you set up 5 specific smaller accounts.
Okay, what are the 5 plates?
The methodology states every business needs these foundational accounts: income, profit, owner's compensation, taxes, and operating expenses, which is commonly called OPEX.
Wait, I see a distinction there that's pretty interesting. Having an owner's compensation account completely separate from the profit account.
Oh, that is a huge point.
Yeah, because it highlights this reality that paying yourself a fair salary for the daily labor you do inside the company is very different from the business actually yielding a profit.
Exactly. The profit is the return on the risk you took to start the entity in the first place. It's not your paycheck for answering emails.
Right. It's a vital distinction. I feel like a lot of entrepreneurs blend the two and end up essentially working a high-stress job for terrible pay.
Rather than running a profitable asset.
Exactly. So you set up these 5 accounts. The next principle is to serve sequentially.
Serve sequentially. Okay.
Right. So all the gross revenue that comes into the business goes straight into the income account. But here's the key. You do not pay bills from this account.
So the income account is purely just a holding tank.
Yes. Then you parse the money out. You transfer a predetermined percentage from income into your profit account, then a percentage into your tax account, then your owner's compensation.
And whatever is left.
Whatever is finally left over,
Right.
the remainder, gets funneled into the operating expenses account. Okay, I can see how the practical effect of that would be pretty immediate. Like, let's say $10,000 comes into the business. Under the old system, the owner looks at their one checking account, sees 10 grand, and thinks, awesome, I have a $10,000 operating budget for the month.
Right. They feel rich.
But under the new system, maybe they allocate $2,000 to profit, $2,000 to taxes, and $4,000 to compensate themselves. So they look at their OPEX account, and there's only $2,000 sitting there.
And boom, they are forced to look at a significantly smaller plate. That triggers that exact toothpaste tube resourcefulness we discussed.
Yeah, panic sets in, but like a good kind of panic.
Exactly. The owner suddenly realizes, wait, I don't have $10,000 to run the business. I have $2,000. They become incredibly critical of every single expense.
They start squeezing the absolute maximum utility out of every dollar they invest back in operations.
They have to. But, setting up the accounts and doing the math on day one seems straightforward enough. The real friction comes when a massive, unexpected bill drops.
Oh, for sure. Because the reality of running a business involves, like, sudden equipment failures or surprise vendor price hikes.
Always.
And if the money to cover that shortfall is sitting right there in the adjacent profit account, I mean, the temptation to just slide it back over to OPEX is going to be overwhelming. You're just a swipe away on your banking app.
The system anticipates that exact failure point. And that brings us to the third principle: remove temptation.
So how do you actually do that?
You don't just open these 5 accounts at your primary bank where you can easily transfer funds between them on an app. No, you move the profit and tax accounts to a completely separate secondary bank.
Oh, wow. So you deliberately create a logistical headache for yourself.
Exactly. You do not set up online transfers. You don't carry a debit card for that secondary bank. You make it slow and highly inconvenient to access those funds.
Out of sight, out of mind.
So-
So you literally can't impulsively raid your own profit margins.
Right. It creates a necessary pause. When that unexpected bill comes, you can't just click a button to cover it. You are forced to figure out how to handle it using the funds you actually have available in OPEX.
That's brilliant.
It is. And that leads right into the fourth principle, which stabilizes the entire process, enforcing a rhythm.
Because most entrepreneurs check their bank balances, daily?
Hmm.
Or even multiple times a day?
Oh, constantly. It becomes this reactionary habit driven by the anxiety of daily cash flow fluctuations.
Right. And that constant checking has to lead to terrible, emotionally driven decision-making.
It does. The owner oscillates between feeling wealthy when a big invoice clears and then feeling completely deprived when payroll hits 2 days later.
It's a roller coaster.
So to break this cycle, the system enforces a strict rhythm. You only log in to allocate funds and pay bills twice a month.
Twice a month.
Yes, the standard recommendation is the 10th and the 25th of the month, or you could do the 1st and the 15th.
Limiting yourself to twice a month feels really restrictive at first glance. But I guess looking at the mechanics of it, batching it on those specific dates aligns perfectly with natural business cycles, right?
Exactly.
Because most vendors issue invoices on the first of the month or the middle of the month, and standard payroll often hits on the 15th and the 30th anyway.
Right. So by only checking and moving money on those 2 specific days, you're matching the natural invoicing rhythm. Cash actually has time to accumulate in the income account.
So you're not just reacting to every single dollar that comes in or goes out.
No. You do a simple scheduled scan on those 2 days. You execute your percentage transfers, you pay the bills from the OPEX account, and then you log out.
It removes the emotional panic entirely. It replaces it with just a predictable, calm, administrative routine.
Which is huge for your mental health as a business owner.
Yeah. Absolutely. The psychological shift is profound.
Mm.
But, I have to play devil's advocate here. A listener actively running a small business right now is likely looking at their massive overhead, their payroll, their expensive software subscriptions, their commercial rent, and thinking, I can't possibly stash away 10 or 20% into a separate profit account today without bouncing a check tomorrow.
And they're probably right. The math simply isn't there for them yet.
So what do?
The author totally acknowledges that trying to jump to a massive profit margin overnight will break a business that is accustomed to consuming all its cash. The implementation requires starting incredibly small.
How small?
You start by allocating just 1% to the profit account, and then you reduce your operating expenses by 1%.
I mean, taking 1% feels entirely symbolic. If a freelancer's business brings in $1,000, 1% is what, $10?
Mm-hmm.
Hiding $10 in a secondary bank account doesn't really seem like it's going to fundamentally restructure a struggling business.
It sounds tiny, I know.
Right.
But while it definitely begins as a psychological mechanism just to build the habit, it actually forces an immediate operational constraint.
How so?
When you reduce your operating budget, even by a tiny fraction, you must change your behavior to accommodate that missing money. The focus shouldn't be on the $10 saved. The focus is on the fact that you must now figure out how to operate on $990.
It initiates the habit of critical evaluation. You have to start looking at where the money is going.
Exactly. And the sources highlight a really fascinating case study to illustrate this. It involves UPS and the power of small constraints.
United Parcel Service. Okay, what do?
So UPS needed to cut costs and increase fleet efficiency. But instead of attempting, massive layoffs or overhauling their entire logistics network overnight, they introduced a seemingly tiny constraint.
What was it?
They optimized their routing software to tell drivers to avoid taking left turns.
Wait, left turns. Just don't turn left.
Basically, yeah. Because think about it, a left turn requires a delivery truck to idle at an intersection while waiting for a gap in oncoming traffic.
Oh, wow. Yeah, you're just sitting there. You are burning fuel and wasting time without actually moving closer to the destination.
Precisely. So by mapping routes consisting almost entirely of right turns, the trucks kept moving. And the elimination of that tiny inefficiency compounded across their massive fleet.
That is wild. Did it actually save them money?
The result was a savings of millions of dollars a year in fuel and time, simply by introducing a minor constraint that forced a more efficient path.
Connecting that left turn analogy back to a listener's small business really makes the 1% rule very actionable.
Right.
Because a financial left turn is like that $200 monthly software subscription that the team hasn't even logged into for 6 months. Or it's paying full retail for new office furniture when lightly used equipment works just as well.
Exactly. The 1% constraint forces the business owner to find those unused subscriptions. They start calling vendors to negotiate better rates. They downgrade their premium internet package to the standard tier because they realize they don't actually need the gigabit speed.
And once you find that initial 1% of fat to trim, you probably realize how much waste is actually sitting in the operation.
Always. People are always shocked by how much they find. And once that baseline is established, The progression scales up. The strategy suggests adjusting these percentages quarterly.
Okay, so every 3 months, the business aims to add roughly 3 percentage points to the profit, owner's comp, or tax accounts while reducing operating expenses by that corresponding amount.
Yes. The journey is gradual. The objective is to slowly dial the business toward healthy industry benchmarks over the course of several quarters.
Do the sources provide concrete targets for those benchmarks?
They do. So, for a business doing under $250,000 in annual revenue, the ideal allocation looks something like 5% for profit, 50% for owner's compensation, 15% for taxes, and 30% for operating expenses.
Okay, so let's follow the timeline forward. A listener implements this. They trim the fat over the course of a year. They've aggressively tackled those financial left turns. Now, they have a substantial pile of cash accumulated at that secondary bank in their profit account.
A great problem to have.
Right. But the innate instinct for a driven entrepreneur is to take that money and immediately plow it right back into marketing or new hires to accelerate growth.
And doing so completely subverts the entire system.
Wait, really? Reinvesting is bad?
If you take the money labeled profit and pump it back into daily operations, it ceases to be profit. It just becomes another operating expense. The money is gone, and the business has simply expanded its capacity to consume cash.
Oh, I see. The sources actually use a great analogy for this exact trap.
The cake analogy.
Yes. Building a business, stressing over the margins, and generating cash only to never actually take a profit is like spending all day baking a complex, beautiful cake. You source the best ingredients, you bake it perfectly, you spend hours decorating it, and then you put it on a pedestal in the kitchen, stare at it, and never allow yourself to eat a single slice.
The effort becomes completely disconnected from the reward.
And it leads to deep resentment of the business.
Totally. Which is why the profit-first methodology imposes strict rules regarding the distribution of that accumulated cash just to prevent that burnout. Profit distributions occur quarterly, and the rule dictates that 50% of the profit account is taken as a direct reward for the owner.
And that 50% is specifically not for the business. It is designated entirely for personal enjoyment.
Right. A family vacation, a nicer dinner out, a new hobby. It is the tangible reward for the immense risk the owner shoulders.
Okay, so what about the other 50%?
The remaining 50% serves a very different purpose. It stays in the account to build a 3-month emergency safety net.
It's like armor for the business.
Exactly. You only ever consider reinvesting excess funds back into aggressive business growth after you have fully secured that 3-month operating reserve.
That makes a lot of sense. That ensures the business can survive a sudden market downturn or, the loss of a major client without throwing the owner into a panic.
Right. Now, the sources also detail a vital modification here for businesses that are currently carrying debt.
Which is a lot of them.
Most of them, frankly. If the company is burdened with heavy loans or credit card balances, taking 50% of the profit for a vacation feels pretty irresponsible.
Yeah, that would feel wrong.
So the framework shifts the distribution to aggressively tackle that burden. You still execute the quarterly distribution, but you use 99% of that money to pay down the debt.
Using the snowball method, right. You target the smallest balance to secure a quick victory or the highest interest rate to mathematically optimize a payoff, and you just knock it out.
Exactly. But the critical nuance here is that you still retain 1% of that distribution as a reward for yourself.
Because dedicating 100% to the debt might clear the balance a few days faster, but it triggers that cake analogy again.
Yeah.
If the owner doesn't feel any tangible reward from the brutal work of turning the business around, their motivation will eventually collapse.
They'll just give up.
Right. That 1% reward might only be enough to buy a hardcover book or, like, a premium cup of coffee. But psychologically, it signals to the brain that the business is finally serving the owner rather than the other way around.
It sustains the behavioral change through the absolute hardest part of the process. And, the psychological framework isn't limited just to the realm of corporate finance.
What if the listener doesn't own a business?
The same behavioral traps that plague CEOs also dictate how we manage our households. Parkinson's law operates identically whether you are running a $1 million logistics company or just managing a biweekly paycheck.
That makes sense. If an individual has $5,000 sitting in their primary personal checking account, they will inherently find a way to spend $5,000 before the next payday.
Exactly. So the smaller plates concept maps perfectly onto personal finance.
Okay, so how do you apply the 5 plates at home?
The application is straightforward. You establish 5 separate accounts for your personal finances. Income, retirement funds, emergencies, recurring payments, and day-to-day expenses.
Okay, so the income account remains the holding tank, just like for a business.
Right.
And the profit equivalent in a household scenario is the retirement fund.
Yes, you pay your future self first. The moment a paycheck clears into the income account, a predetermined percentage is immediately transferred to retirement.
Then you fund the emergency account. Then you allocate money for the fixed recurring payments like rent, mortgages, car payments, insurance.
And the final, smallest plate left over is the day-to-day spending money for groceries, entertainment, and discretionary purchases.
Looking at a day-to-day account that only holds a fraction of your actual paycheck forces incredible discipline. If you only see $200 available for the week's groceries and entertainment, you stop ordering expensive takeout.
Yeah.
You start looking for the personal financial left turns.
Exactly. And if personal debt is a factor, that same 99-to-1 rule applies to the retirement allocation, aggressively paying down credit cards while still saving a tiny fraction to build that compounding habit.
Right.
But the true mastery of this system, the mechanism that virtually guarantees long-term wealth, is how it dictates the handling of new income.
You mean the battle against lifestyle creep?
Oh, it is a real battle. The rule is rigid. You must keep your current lifestyle expenses fixed for a minimum of 5 years.
5 years, wow.
Because when someone receives a raise at work or a substantial tax refund, the immediate instinct is to expand the plate. They upgrade their vehicle, they rent a more expensive apartment, they buy designer clothes.
And the increased income is immediately swallowed by increased overhead.
Yeah.
So they remain trapped in the paycheck-to-paycheck cycle, just operating at a higher tax bracket with nicer things.
Precisely. So the profit-first rule for personal income increases is the 50-50 split. If you get a raise, you are permitted to use 50% of that new money to upgrade your lifestyle.
Okay. And the rest?
The remaining 50% must be permanently locked into your retirement and savings allocations.
Yeah.
The 5-year time frame is crucial because it cements the behavioral baseline while allowing compound interest to actually take root. You get to enjoy the tangible fruits of your hard work, but you mathematically guarantee that your wealth grows simultaneously.
So the entire system is really built on just outsmarting our own predictable impulses.
That's the core of it, yeah.
Synthesize these concepts. The main thesis the sources present is that profit, whether in a business or a personal savings account, is not an event. It is not a magical finish line you cross someday in the distant future if you just manage to work hard enough.
No, profit is a mechanical habit. It must be engineered into the foundation of your financial life from day one, even if you are only scraping away 1% at a time.
It represents a shift from relying on discipline to relying on design. The system accepts that humans are emotional, reactionary creatures, rather than expecting us to suddenly become perfectly rational, willpower-driven machines.
Right, it's about designing an environment that leverages our flaws instead of fighting them.
Which leaves us with a final, slightly broader thought to ponder as we wrap up this deep dive into the source material. We've spent this discussion analyzing how Parkinson's law affects our capital. We've seen how we will inevitably consume exactly the amount of financial resources we are given.
Right.
But capital isn't our only resource. Think about your free time, your daily energy, your focused attention. If Parkinson's law is a universal rule of human behavior, what other areas of your life could suddenly become profoundly efficient if you artificially shrank the plate you serve them on?
I mean, if you limit yourself to 1 hour for a task that usually takes 3, you are forced to figure out which steps are actually necessary and which are just busy work.
Exactly. The objective extends far beyond stopping a business from being a cash-eating monster. It is about becoming ruthlessly resourceful with everything you hold valuable. It is about ensuring that you are squeezing the absolute maximum utility out of the resources you have right down to the very last drop.